Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and on this episode we're doing a top 10. Topic for the top 10? Top 10 Macho Man Randy Savage matches. And I'm actually kind of surprised I haven't done this already. Macho Man, one of the most prolific wrestlers of all time, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, one of the most beloved wrestlers of all time, and definitely, for his era, one of the top wrestlers in the world. With that being said, let's jump right into the list. Number 10, from UK Rampage 1992, Macho Man Randy Savage versus the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels. This was somewhat early on in Michaels' solo run, and he had Savage's ex-manager, Sensational Sherry. This was after Savage had reunited with Miss Elizabeth. There's a lot of back and forth between Elizabeth and Sherry, which this is probably the match with the most physicality from Elizabeth. She was serving as pretty much the equalizer to equalize Sherry here. This was one of those matches where you really started to see that Shawn Michaels was going to be something really special. He was able to hang with the Macho Man here, elevate himself. Just a great match, hence why it's on my list. I'll go from that, our number 9. Probably the best match of this man's career, The Ultimate Warrior versus Randy Macho Man Savage from WrestleMania 7. I've gone on record, there are very few Ultimate Warrior matches I like. I do like this. I like the Hogan Warrior match from the year before. But other than that, they're pretty few and far between to find a really good Ultimate Warrior match. The fact that Macho Man was able to pull this match out of him and have one of the great matches in WrestleMania, in my opinion, just goes to show you how great the Macho Man himself was. This was such a fun match, especially for a kid of that generation growing up and watching these two guys, two absolute icons. What a great match. I'll go from that, our number 8. Bret the Hitman Hart versus Shawn Michaels from Saturday night's main event. This was a freshly face-turned Randy Savage going up against the heel Bret Hart, who was still in the Hart Foundation. This match is probably mostly remembered for what happened after the match when the Honky Tonk Man and the Hart Foundation attacked Savage, which brought Elizabeth out with Hulk Hogan, which ended up starting the Mega Powers, which was one of the great stories in all of wrestling. Just a really fun match. Again, much like I said with Shawn Michaels, you got to see Bret Hart really step his game up and really live up to expectations and exceed expectations. He'd eventually become the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. But at this point, he was just a tag team member. This was probably one of the matches that set his career on the trajectory to be a main star. I really enjoy this match, the whole story of it. It's just awesome. I'll go from that, on number 7. Tito Santana versus Macho Man Randy Savage from Primetime Wrestling. And this was another one of those matches. Tito Santana was always kind of the gatekeeper in WWE of the mid-card guys. You knew if you could beat Tito Santana, you would be in the running for an Intercontinental Championship, which this was for the Intercontinental Championship, or you were in the running to be a main star in the company. This is just a really fun match. Two great wrestlers. I really enjoy this. Now going from that, our number 6. Diamond Dallas Page versus Macho Man Randy Savage from the Great American Bash in 1997. This entire feud with DDP and Savage really helped put DDP on the map, much like I said with Bret, much like I said with Shawn Michaels. This was another time where Savage helped make a guy bigger than what he had been before that, all while reminding us just how great Randy Savage is himself. This feud was so fantastic. It's one of my favorite feuds in WCW history. I absolutely love this. Like I said, it's a star-making feud for Diamond Dallas Page, one of the all-timers in WCW, and that was helped by another all-timer in Macho Man Randy Savage. Going from that, our number 5, sticking with WCW, almost 2 years exactly to the day before that, from Great American Bash 1995, Randy Savage versus Nature Boy Ric Flair. This was one of those feuds, Flair and Savage, it always felt like they could take a year off, take 2 years off, take 3 years off, and jump right back in and have the same intensity that they would have 2 years before, 3 years before. months before. These guys could turn it on and go at each other. I mean, we're talking about two of the best wrestlers of their generation and arguably two of the best wrestlers of all time. This was an absolutely astounding match. I really loved this. Again, this really showed Savage in a new light, going over to WCW and going back to the form that we all knew and loved of being one of the best wrestlers in the world. Absolutely amazing match, hence why it's on my list. Now going from that, our number 4, it's deja vu all over again. From WrestleMania 8, Macho Man Randy Savage versus the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Everything I loved about the Great American Bash match, I loved even more with this match. This had a sense of urgency. This had a sense of importance. This was one of those dream matches that we did get when Ric Flair was in WWE at the time. And he was only there for a little bit over a year, close to 2 years. And we never really got the match with Hogan that we wanted, but we did get this match with Savage. And this match, much like I said with the Warrior match, this is one of the great matches in WrestleMania history. I mean, how can you go wrong? Again, it's two of the greats of all time. Absolutely love this match. I'll go from that, our number 3. From CWA Wrestling, from December 12th, 1983, a steel cage match, Macho Man Randy Savage versus Jerry the King Lawler. This is a match that not a ton of people have seen. I believe there's a couple different versions of it on YouTube. I know I have seen it on YouTube previously. If you want to check it out, just put in Savage vs. Lawler and you'll see the cage. The cage is different. It looks like kind of like chicken wire, and it's around the ring almost like a Hell in a Cell would be. This may not be as technically sound as some of the other matches on this list, but what it lacks in technical prowess, it makes up tenfold in storytelling and psychology. This is one of the better ring psychology matches that you'll ever see. I mean, we got two guys that absolutely live, eat, sleep, and breathe pro wrestling and could do pretty much anything. This was a fantastic match. I really hope you go and look for this if you haven't seen it, because it is definitely worth watching. Even now, 40 years later, it still holds up. We'll go from that, our number 2. We mentioned him earlier. Diamond Dallas Page versus Macho Man Randy Savage from Halloween Havoc 1997. I talked about how great this feud was and how awesome it was for DDP's career. This, to me, was the ultimate match of the feud. This was a match that, again, really cemented DDP as the guy, as someone that could become a world champion. And that's all kudos to Randy Savage, because Savage laid it out. He was willing to give DDP all the love that he needed, all of the spots that he needed, all of the hype that he needed. This is probably my favorite WCW Randy Savage match, which is kind of a spoiler for number 1. You know now it's not going to be a WCW era match, but this is an awesome match. I really enjoyed this. It's just amazing in my opinion. Now before I get to number 1, I do a thing here on my top 10s called the best of the rest. Basically it was things that were considered for the list but didn't quite make it. First up, from Saturday night's main event, Macho Man Randy Savage versus Ted DiBiase. This was, I believe, a month or so before their match at WrestleMania 4, and this was, in my opinion, the better of the two matches. DiBiase doesn't quite get the credit he deserves for being as great as he was during this time frame, and again, this is a whole list about Savage, so I can't say enough about how great Savage is. I absolutely love these two together. This is probably my favorite DiBiase Savage match, hence why it was considered, but didn't quite make it. Next up, from Superstars of Wrestling, from November 22nd, 1986, Macho Man Randy Savage versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. The only reason this match didn't make the list is it's rather short. It's only about 6 or 7 minutes. But here we have two of the great wrestlers of all time. Again, I keep mentioning that. And this is kind of a hidden gem. This is a match that Savage crushed Steamboat's larynx and put him out of action for a little while. This is a match where he used a ring bell and used a double axe handle with it and a diving elbow with it into Steamboat's throat. This was fantastic storytelling. Absolutely a fantastic match. I recommend checking this out. I recommend checking out all of these matches. I believe all of them except for the Lawler match are on Peacock right now. So yeah, go check this out. Now before I do get to my number 1, if you think I left a match off the list, if you think I put one too high, put one too low, let me know down here in the comments. While you're there, smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. You see where it says join, that's how you become a channel member. Becoming a channel member definitely helps me out. With all that being said, my number one Macho Man Randy Savage match from WrestleMania 3, Macho Man Randy Savage versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And with what I just said, that's kind of foreshadowing. That was the setup match for this match. This is probably in most wrestling fans' top 10 matches of all time, and for a lot of wrestling fans, it's right up there at number one. I would say it's on the very short list, in my opinion, of greatest matches of all time. This match and the Funk versus Flair I Quit match, Steamboat versus Flair matches, Okada versus Omega matches, they're all kind of interchangeable in my opinion. They could all be considered the greatest match of all time. This is a match that set the bar for WrestleMania, for what wrestling could be for the next, we're 30 years on now, and people are still trying to live up to the quality of this match. And I don't think we're ever going to look back at this and not say that this isn't one of the greatest matches of all time, in front of one of the best crowds of all time, and one of the biggest events in wrestling history, arguably the biggest event in wrestling history. An absolutely phenomenal match. Like I said, with a lot of these, with two of the great wrestlers of all time. If you watch one match on this list, let it be this match, and you've probably seen it already if you're this far into the list, or if you've watched this video at all. And I've probably seen this match a good 20 to 30 times at the very least. I used to have it on VHS, I have it on DVD, it's on Peacock now. I watched WrestleMania 3 in its entirety probably at least 20 or 30 times when I was a kid, if not more, and that's probably going on the low end side of it. This is, like I said, one of the great matches of all time, one of the most iconic matches of all time. That's why it has to be our number one. With all that being said, if you made it here to the end, let me know your favorite Randy Savage match. Put it down here in the comments. And while you're there, give me a ooh yeah, snap into a Slim Jim. And I know that's a terrible Randy Savage, but it's the best I can do. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another Heel Heat Top 10.